I would guess that many of the skills and knowledge you've learned in the last 10 years has been on YouTube. Edutainment is massively popular. It's kind of like somebody hid the vegetables in the dessert. We're learning while we're having a good time.
I have learned so much on YouTube over the last few years. And I want to be able to use these videos in my classroom, and I do from time to time. They can often explain complex concepts in an engaging and insightful and hopefully great way, authoritative. However, I do struggle, and I hope you struggle too, because I think the struggle is part of it, is when we should and when we shouldn't, and how to be selective on which videos to show. So welcome to the EdTech Unpacked podcast, where we inspire and equip educators to create meaningful learning experiences, highlighting a thoughtful approach to the integration of technology as we teach and transform the lives of our students. I'm Desmond Suarez.
And I'm Arron Long, and we're passionate about helping educators better use technology to engage their students.
And I am very excited this week to be able to have my friend and YouTuber Phil Edwards to discuss edutainment with us on this episode. He has nearly 500,000 subscribers on YouTube and makes videos, as he says, about business and tech and culture and how they all intersect together. And he has made videos about Buc-ee's and the Turkish hair transplant, which I probably might need one day. I looked at that. I watched that one very carefully. Barbecue across the United States, Fabergé eggs, which actually I went and saw on Friday. There's a display here in Richmond, and so many more. A few years ago, I noticed that it seemed like Phil and I lived in the same town. In fact, it was the Fabergé eggs that really tipped me off first, is that I'd seen them at our local fantastic Virginia Museum of Fine Art museum. And I started watching them. I was like, hey, I know that street. I know that place. And so I first became a Patreon, which you should. And later I reached out to him and asked him if he could come talk to my videography class about what it's like to be a YouTuber. And we've kept up from there. And I'm so glad that he's also agreed to be on this podcast with us. Phil, tell us a little bit about yourself and the content you make.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah, I do make a range of stuff, but right now my main output is probably about 20-ish minute videos that are sort of a mix of either a lot of research and a little bit of reporting, or a lot of reporting and a little bit of research, but hopefully one of the two is in there. And they are about all sorts of different topics, that are either news adjacent or have some sort of tie into a bigger cultural discussion that's happening at the moment. And then I also do shorts occasionally, much to my chagrin. I'm being forced to do those by the demands of my job. But yeah, so it's a mixture of that. And then I also run a newsletter where I kind of put it all out and write a little extra article for people to read about something that I couldn't get into in the video. So yeah, that's kind of the mix of stuff I do. And it is my full-time job now. So has been for a couple years. And before that, I was working as a journalist at a larger company.
We're glad you're here. And I always I watch your videos as soon as I can when they come out. I appreciate them.
Well, and Desmond introduced me to you, Phil, as I was sharing a few minutes ago. And I shared this off air, but was kind of newest subscriber, by the way, watching through some of your content. And my wife was like, hey, I've seen his videos before. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. And she had seen one of the ones I was watching, but not on the rundown here. But now I'm curious, you're saying you connect these to things, modern events. How does a 1.5 million view orange juice video connect? I would ask you that question.
That is a good question. I think you may have stumped me. You may have gotten me there, actually.
It was a great video.
I think that for a while I discovered that a vein that I could tap was really this like nostalgia vein, and I thought that it was kind of endless for people. But one of the tough things about the job is like you kind of run out of things to be nostalgic for after a while, or they don't have a story that's good enough, So ultimately that ended up being the bar for me, whether the story was good enough. But if anybody knows anything as beloved as frozen orange juice, let me know and I'll make a video on it.
Well, I want to start with it. We always like to start with a get to know you question, and all of us spend probably too much time on YouTube. Maybe I'm projecting here. I spend a lot of time watching YouTube, but we run across channels that we really enjoy, and of course, Phil's should be one of yours. But what is a YouTube channel that you've really been enjoying lately? Aaron, you want to start us off, and then we'll go to
Oh
Phil?
yeah, sure. Man, so there's a couple, but I'm gonna go with so I'm late to the game. Okay, Outdoor Boys. Man, I was totally clueless, and about probably 4 or 5 months ago, I came across one of his videos, and watched it all, and I just started serial watching this stuff. And I asked my son, he's college age, have you ever heard of the Outdoor Boys? And he's like, Dad, everybody's heard of the Outdoor Boys. So if you haven't heard of the Outdoor Boys, you should go check them out. Sadly, not producing regularly anymore, but I think that's actually why I learned about him. I saw a news story that he was retiring, and what does he have, like 20 million subscribers or something insane? And I'm like, oh, I've never heard of this guy. He's retiring. And so I went to check out his video. Now, literally, this is legit. Every Friday evening, I wind down by watching an Outdoor Boys video every Friday. And sometimes it's serial watching, but I love his content.
I've never seen him, so I'll have to check him out.
Oh, man, it's great.
Yeah, I hope he's all right. I know he retired. I think just got burned out, right? Yeah.
Well, I think so. I think what he said was he wanted to, spend more family time, but he's actually done some recent stuff, produced some video for a friend of his where his friend was having health issues. So he went on his channel and produced one of his regular episodes on his friend's channel. And so he's had some recent content out, but just, kind of like your content, Phil, just he's super relatable. He's down to earth. He's not scripted or planned. And that's what I think is so great about that space of edutainment is you're learning. So I'm learning, okay, if I'm stuck in the wild, how am I going to survive? Literally you're picturing yourself as you're watching his videos. Could I do that? Would I make it through the night? Probably not, but I'm a little better equipped than I was. So really good stuff. So I'm anxious to hear y'all's answer though. How about you guys?
Yeah. Mine is this very nerdy VFX channel called Corridor Crew, and I have a little routine where I will watch them on the actual TV, not just on my laptop. That's kind of the top shelf status, for a YouTube show. And they break down the visual effects in different movies, whether it's Mission Impossible or F1 or whatever, and they kind of go through how it works. And I like it because it's sort of tangentially related to what I do, and there are some applications to software that I've messed with, but also it's low-key enough that I don't really have to be thinking about anything. And so, yeah, I've just really enjoyed them. And according to YouTube did an annual review in the same way that Spotify does, and apparently I'm in the top 1%, and I almost tweeted it at some of them that I was in their top 1% of viewers, but I was too embarrassed to do it. I was I can't
be proud. You're declaring it now.
No, I can't do it. In case I ever, interact with these people, they can't know that I'm too addicted to their work. So
I love it. And they do a diversity of all VFX stuff, but the one that sticks out to me is the ants one. Have you seen that where they visualize all the ants in the world in one spot?
Crazy.
It is crazy. A channel that I've been enjoying, and I was just looking it up. This one doesn't have many subscribers, only 267,000, but which is a lot, but it's still compared to the others we're talking about. But it is GX Ace, and I don't know if you've seen them, but he does camera reviews, but which I consume way too many camera reviews and lens reviews, and that's a rabbit hole I go down. But his are done as if there's a weird future and he's looking back at it. And so he's this cyborg. It sounds really weird if you got to watch it, because it's he's talking about history, but it's the new stuff. And it's very modern and dark in a really powerful way, really cinematic. It's really beautiful, and he's just doing a review on a camera, or a lens or something, and it's just gorgeous content. So yeah, I like the mix of that stuff. Yeah, GX Ace, they're pretty entertaining.
Oh, cool. I'll have to check him out. I'll add that to my list. Yeah.
Well, hey, we're here on this episode today. I mean, Phil is here. We want to take advantage of this opportunity to really kind of learn about edutainment. But let me ask this first, I guess. What is edutainment? I'm going to throw that to Phil. Phil, tell us, what is edutainment?
Well, I mean, I primarily use it as a self-deprecatory thing because I think it's a little bit embarrassing to call myself that. So I try to get in front of the label a little bit, so people can't do it for me. But for me, the reason that I call myself that is, while I consider what I do to be journalism in some fashion, I'm also very respectful of the deeper and more serious work that a lot of journalists have to do. And so to me, I like that word edutainment because it tells people that I'm not taking what I do too seriously, because although I occasionally touch on serious topics, I'm not doing FOIA requests for, boring like school board information or so, all the hard work that a lot of journalists do, or I'm not going to war zones or something like that. But I do really care about getting to the best approximation of the truth that I can get to via research and reporting. So I do want to convey that. So I think that good edutainment has those things. It's got that rigorous allegiance to an attempt to find the truth. And then also it is willing to be entertaining about it, because if people don't watch it, they're not going to ever see it. So you have to have a little bit of candy to go with it.
Absolutely. How about you, Desmond? I mean, that's a great summary. In fact, I would comment, I appreciate your focus on the journalistic side. Obviously, that's in your background, but I don't have that in my background. And just hearing your framing of that's actually really helpful, because it's respect oriented. It's hey, I'm not here just as a hardcore journalist. They do this. Here's what I do. But it's akin to it in a more lighthearted, maybe not whimsical, but just kind of fun way. So, Desmond, how about you, man? How would you describe edutainment?
Yeah, as I was looking up, I don't know where I heard the term first, but I was like, yeah, that is like most of what I watch on YouTube is edutainment. It's like entertainment, and I'm learning. If it's just one or the other, I'm probably not interested in it. And combining those together, makes me spend a lot of time on it. But as I was looking it up in preparation, it's anything from like, the Leapfrog, little tablet you might have given your kid, or, that is teaching them something, but also entertaining them, or, a lot of the, 24-hour news channels, they're more, or the late night hosts. I don't know about education as much on those, but you're mixing the spectrum goes from entertainment to education or informative, and it really is a wide spectrum. But it's, as we stated in the intro, it's like hiding the vegetables in the deliciousness, making it enjoyable and teaching you something.
Absolutely. I'm not going to better define it, but I was thinking about, are you guys familiar with Caleb Pike's DSLR video shooter YouTube channel?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I love his content. And I was thinking, is that edutainment? And I think it is. But I'm like, okay, yeah, because I'm there to learn how to build rigs and see the newest, coolest stuff and the way he's doing it in small form factors. And but to me, that's like, okay, yes, I'm learning, but I love it too. Like, it's just this like... I want more of that while I'm learning. So it's a lot of fun. I mean, who doesn't love edutainment, as it turns out?
And this channel is a form of edutainment. It's, we don't go into the journalistic side. We're more, focused on other perspectives, and, hopefully you're entertained with us, but also learn how to better, instruct your students. And that's our goal.
So with that, Desmond, let's unpack the tech.
All right, so our first question, we're just gonna kind of throw these out to Phil, and then we'll discuss them together. But Phil, what place do you think edutainment content has in a classroom or not? Do you envision your content in the classroom?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say like one of the greatest honors I get is when a teacher asks me if they can play one of my videos in a classroom. And I mean, they don't need to email me about it. I think that's why it's an honor. They're like so nice that they're even emailing me if it's okay.
I never thought about that. I just show them.
Yeah. It's like, y'all, you could just go ahead. It's fine, guys.
Is that official here? You're saying every teacher can just play your content in their classroom?
Preferably on a loop. Yes. Yeah. As long as you don't have an ad blocker installed. Yeah, just on a loop. But yeah, like that's always just a great honor. And so, yeah, if they think it serves their goals or kindles a larger discussion, I mean, that's awesome for me. So I'm just excited to hear it. I have no idea what goals a teacher is trying to achieve on a certain day. So maybe I would be harmful for that. I don't know, but I do think it's an honor for me, that I can say. But
Yeah, as I think about what content I will play in a classroom, I'm often watching a video and being like, "Oh, is this going to work well for my content?" It was Johnny Harris just released one this weekend, an hour long, on fascism, and I'm like, well. I'm actually studying that right now in my history classes. We're finishing World War I and going into World War II. And I'm like, that fits well, but I'm not going to show an hour-long video in my classroom on that.
Desmond,
then,
what are you saying about our podcast right now?
Oh, I mean, if you show it to your students on loop, like Bill said.
Well, ours is like an hour-long content. So.
I watch it, but showing it to my students is, another kind of thing. And the other thing that I try and figure out is, and I think he did strike the tone of trying not to be too specifically political in that video, but when you're watching something for entertainment, and you do a really good job of this too, Phil. I think actually you do really well at this. But in a classroom, I'm trying to stay not political in my classroom. And I don't want to bring politics into it. I try really hard to hide who I vote for and stuff for my students. It's an ethical standard I have. But I want to discuss the topics with them. And so that's a consideration I have is this too politically one way or the other, or is it objective? And then a video like that, I probably will give them a link to it, but not play it in the classroom. Maybe I'll play a part of it that is specifically relevant.
Well, I like that approach. I mean, it's very, it's almost impossible now to screen out all content that has bias. I mean, we all have bias. It creeps into so much of the content out there, probably including ours, definitely including ours. And so as a teacher, I think it's like, it's a burden to think of it as, boy, that means I have to pre-screen everything. So it's not just an hour in the classroom, it's at least an hour ahead of time. And I've got to be tuned into that if I'm going to do it well. I think, Desmond, you're probably there too. I can think of at least one or two videos I've played in the classroom that I did not fully pre-screen. Have you ever been there?
Yes, unfortunately.
And something happened. What's that?
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately,
and you're panicking when it pops up.
Oh my goodness. I've had to pause a video, apologize to the kids, explain it, email the parents. Okay, this is like,
wow, I haven't had it that bad.
I mean, and probably I'm overplaying it, but it was something I was like, I never would have played that in the classroom. So I think it's partly that too. It's like, the pace of content development out there, it's just like staying up with it personally is one thing, but then also screening content to play in the classroom. That's the part I think is really tricky. And obviously that's kind of core to what we're talking about here today. It's not just, is it appropriate, but how do you even prepare to, screen content?
And I was trying to think, I know I've sent at least one video to my students of yours. I think it was the migrant mother one that I showed for my photography class. And maybe the Soviet corn one. I think I might have shown for something. And actually your newest one on the Ring doorbell, that actually fits directly into the lesson I'm teaching right now for my AP class. So we're talking about security and personally identifiable information. And so I'm at least going to give them a link to that, maybe play it in class depending on how time goes, because it ties in directly. So, if it fits my standards directly and fulfills what I need to do in class, I'll use a video to replace what I would, spend class time doing. And class time is very valuable. So if I don't have the time, I'll send the video to a student to say, hey, this is optional, or this is something you should watch. It really feeds in to extend the content.
Hey, so Since you referenced that one, Desmond, Phil, how did you feel like carrying that dog out in public? 'Cause you seem to be pretty embarrassed. I would have been embarrassed. Was that legitimate embarrassment you were feeling in that moment?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, in that video, basically I had to test the Ring camera's search party feature, which claims to be able to find lost dogs. And because I don't have a dog, I carried around this stuffed dog around my neighborhood, and it was profoundly humiliating. I was like, I'm 42. What am I doing? What's happening with my life? But I did get a dog out of it. I like him a lot, even though he's a stuffed dog. So I have a friend now in the office, which is nice. Yeah, I have to turn that off,
All right, so I guess my framing there at the end, it kind of leads me to this. Teachers are pre-screening stuff, hopefully, but it kind of brings in this question of how can we evaluate the trustworthiness of content? So it's not just screening it, but it's how trustworthy, how authoritative. Hey, I don't have that answer. Desmond, Phil, you want to take the lead on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would really hope that teachers look to, if they're using YouTubers or something like that, I would really hope that they use YouTubers who list sources and just publicly list their sources so that those are available. And obviously, you're talking about the time burden that a teacher has being quite high. So it's not as if the person would need to click through to all of those sources, but even just the fact that they exist can be quite a useful indicator. And then you can use that as a vetting to add a person to a trusted list. Because if they're not including sources, and if some of those sources aren't primary or super close secondary sources, I think you should really be wary of using that in class, because not only will it allow errors or false narratives to sneak in, but the more of that there is, the more of the bias that will sneak in that can be deleterious to a good classroom environment anyway. It's like if you learn enough about an issue from a primary or close secondary source, not only are you going to limit false narratives and facts, but you're going to limit bias to some degree, because you're just going to know too much to have too hot of a take. I mean, it's just... at least that's what I believe about a lot of issues. I'm sure there are some that are just, black and white one way or the other. But yeah, so I think that's like a great backstop to put in. Just say, like, do they have in the description a link to sources? And then even if they do it once, maybe that a really strong source list can be enough to vet you for that YouTuber in the future. But not everybody follows the same standards. So yeah, I think that's a great first step to take, maybe.
Yeah, I wrote this question in there because it's something that I've started thinking more about. As production value has gotten so much easier. I mean, there's with AI, like I would draw some heavy lines of like, I'm not going to show an AI generated video to my students. And not that AI generated can't be good, but it's this bar that you set that, I think, because it lowers the bar of production so people can make it easier. In fact, I've started taking that in my personal viewing. If I see I'm not seeing much AI generated content on social media on YouTube, because it probably goes against their policies, but every time I see one, I actually flag it. I say misinformation. I go in there and I report it to YouTube and I say, this is misinformation. And to a degree, I think it is. Some of them, I don't take the time to verify whether the information is wrong or not, but it is projecting itself with an authority that I don't think it has. And I think of caveats like that, like, one of the advantages to those abilities is there might be a great journalist that speaks, or, great producer that speaks a language, that lives in a country that doesn't have access to translation services, that they can create that, but then they get locked in with the noise of all the junk. And but yeah, then I, just creating videos without AI, that has become so much easier. And so it's weird how our brain will see a higher production quality and assume that it's authoritative. And we just do that automatically. And so I do try to be careful with the content I show my students by first, like, seeing multiple of their videos to see if they are going in certain patterns, to see if they have some kind of authoritativeness, like, you have a journalism background. That raises it to a bar to me, because you have training and you have had mentorship that has taught you a standard of authoritativeness and your sources that, raises the bar. Like, it doesn't mean you're always going to be right, but you care whether you're right or not, and you're going to be digging into whether you're right or not. And you're going to ask those questions instead of just, moving forward with it.
That's a really good framing. And what you said there towards the end, Desmond, about, have I seen multiple of their videos? So, Desmond and I both kind of, I think, approach technology. In this case, it's content, but technology in the classroom kind of similarly, in that I've never been somebody to like try and throw everything out at the kids. It's like, I actually, even though I love technology, I'm a big evangelist for it as a classroom tool to better engage kids. That's what we're all about here on this podcast. I actually, when I was full-time in the classroom, didn't introduce a lot of new things during the year. I would introduce it after the summer, kind of vet things out, and then now next year looks a little different. And that was kind of my iterative process. And so I don't want the teachers to ever think out there that are watching this like, oh, I've got to, always be throwing out new tools, but also in this case, new content. There shouldn't be pressure towards that. But here's what I would say. I also know a lot of teachers that don't themselves consume content. So they're not like, they're not watching YouTube frequently. And I know this is kind of keying on YouTube, but it's a good kind of metric to gauge things as to how engaged are people with what's happening out there within the space professionally. Okay. And there's so much happening that, you do need to have a presence, this is my opinion, in consuming content in a professional context. Because, and I'll go back to Caleb Pike as a good example. I've used his videos to send in a classroom setting. Okay, I think he's phenomenal at what he does. His videos have real value, and the production quality is great. There's not a lot of fluff. It's excellent. It's clean. He's a great example, but I almost feel, you get to a place you almost feel like, not that you have a relationship with the person, but kind of who they are a bit, because you've seen a composite of their content. And so that's the type of content I'm very comfortable sharing. Like, I may not have even watched every second of a video of his. I'd be pretty confident sharing his content in the context of a classroom setting if it related to what I was teaching or wanting the kids to learn. So it's like I've vetted the source, okay, because I've personally engaged with the content in a substantial way. And I think the flip side of that is what's way more common, unfortunately, and that's teachers like, okay, I've got this topic today. I need to grab a quick engaging video to show so the kids can like get excited about this content or whatever. And it's so on the fly. I mean, this is the struggle of especially K-12 education. Higher learning has it a little better. You can really be a content expert and vet your content out because you're teaching fewer classes and you're kind of on repeat. And so that allows you to build the quality year over year. In a K-12 setting, it is not that way. You are on the fly, class to class. Desmond, you know what I mean here, right? And every teacher out there in that environment. So I think it like breeds this tendency towards that ladder of, let me just grab something that's going to grab the kids' attention today. And to me, that's not the way to go with content. So I don't know if that helps frame this, but for me, that's kind of how I look at it.
So Phil, as a, trained journalist, you bring those tools into your production. How do you verify that the sources you're using? We talked about like how we verify videos or creators, and I still think there's some open questions there. But, as you are putting the material together, I think it's helpful for our audience to understand what are the processes that you go through to verify what you are about to say on camera.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a little more picky about it than maybe even some of my peers, which I don't say in a bragging way because I think most audiences don't care that much. But I pretty much rely on either very close secondary sources, or primary sources. So obviously, I mean, y'all, have taught social studies and stuff like that, but close secondary source being a contemporary source would kind of fit that bill for me sufficiently, even though that might not always fit the technical definition. But like a newspaper clipping would certainly be sufficient source for me. Even a contemporary book sometimes about a topic that may have been covered later, but was covered more closely and differently in a contemporaneous fashion. So those would be the close secondaries. And then for primaries, I would include stuff like, right now I'm working on a story about political donations. And so I'm just checking everything with FEC filings, and that's pretty easy. Like, you can just go on there and they have it indexed on there. So that would suffice as a primary source to me. And then for a potential secondary source, I'm hoping to speak to a reporter about this on camera, just because she might have more expertise than I would in this field, just to kind of vibe check some of my assumptions. I'm not sure if that'll happen or not, but yeah, I would say the other piece is like for issues where people are alive, reporting is also so helpful, and anyone who doesn't think that has never done it. So if you see videos or journalism where somebody is talking to someone who has experienced something, or if they're talking to an academic, even not all academics are created equal, but usually they'll know a lot. That to me is always a good sign that they're trying to learn a bit more, because that just gives people this kind of base knowledge that can be really helpful. So yeah, I would say those are kind of how I do it. I love Wikipedia. I think it's an amazing resource. I even enjoy and like some of the large language model tools and research tools. I think they're a great starting point. They're invaluable, but they would never make it as a source in a video for me, either of those. That's just not even close. And even lots of books wouldn't make it too. So, I'm not saying that a teacher should do this, but like I'm checking the sources in the book that I read to make sure that they're not bad, because sometimes you'll read a book with a very fancy hardcover on it, and then the source is like www.funfacts.com or something, and it's like doesn't hold up to scrutiny at all. So you've got to be really rigorous about it.
The books thing cracks me up. Like we'll go to these educational technology conferences, and if you go to a session, a lot of the sessions, they'll say like author of, right? And then they'll sometimes like hand the book out at the, in the meeting, and it's like, I think it's part of their speaker fee. But then you'll get it, and nothing is self-publishing. It just, anyone can self-publish. So it doesn't add any kind of authority. And so you'll get the book and you'll see like, oh, this didn't even have an editor. Like they just like self-publish this, but it gives this this like sense of authority just because it's on paper, but not all books and not all authority.
Well, it's sort of the equivalent of a nice lens pointing at somebody is a fancy book cover, I mean, obviously it's a huge burden to try to vet everything, but yeah, it's the same dynamic that exists there too.
I see in a lot of your videos that you do often have a book that you count as like your primary source, or not a primary source and secondary, but like your main source for a video. How do you go about that and choosing that? And
I mean, yeah, like I have on I did a video about Amazon, and so I had just read 2 Brad Stone books that he had written. He's a reporter for Bloomberg. I read the sources when I read the book. They're great. They're all, either tied to documents that I can look up myself or personal interviews. And so in that case, it's kind of a no-brainer for me to do it the same way that it might be a no-brainer for a teacher to point to a video instead of make a video, because it's sufficiently vetted. Like I know that this is good work, and anything that I would do would be redundant or not scalable. So yeah, it's kind of just looking at that and looking at the footnotes, knowing a bit about the character of the reporting that's done. But there are lots of bad books though. I've definitely run into books where I'm just like, this is not good. This is a bad book. And academic papers too, and so, and I, because I don't want to like insult people in my videos or in my newsletter. I don't typically mention the ones that aren't very good, but they're out there. So
you mentioned earlier like Wikipedia and the AI summarization tools, and I'm glad you're being cautious about that. Like they're helpful to like use to check things, but then they don't always carry authority in the same way. But are there new tools that have helped you in your research and to be able to learn more about a topic that you're using?
Yeah, I mean, so it's tricky because AI is such a polarizing issue that I think it's hard for people to kind of listen to what a person is saying about it. Not for you all. You all are very, able listeners, but like I really flinch at the idea of anybody using it for writing. I hate that. And it makes me just, no offense if either of y'all have, but it makes me very sad when I hear about people using it for writing. And to some degree for research, although I think it is a good way to like really get your feet wet and in a field that you know nothing about, and then be completely dissatisfied with it. Act as if it's just someone who approached you on the street saying these things, and it's like, oh, that's an interesting perspective. I'll look into it. So that's, with those caveats having been said, I do find that it is very useful for me because an important sort of tool that is common in journalism these days is kind of a data analysis and data journalism and stuff like that. And because I lack programming ability, it can really help with that. And so it can also really help with visualizations. So like I mentioned, I'm working on this video now about the relationship between donors and PACs and super PACs and candidates, and it's very complex. And I'm able to kind of vibe code, as the term goes, a pretty beautiful and complex animation that in the past I would have had to animate with After Effects, which is an animation program that I often use. And so that not only has that made my job practically easier, but it's allowed me to see relationships in a more complex way than I would have otherwise. Of course, I'm manually inputting all that data to make sure that it's accurate and using the AI merely as a visualization tool in that case. But that's super useful. That's great. I love doing that. So there's a bunch of things like that.
You get to see the data from a different angle. It's like the same data, but if you visualize it right, you see it from a different perspective.
Yeah, like I have all these little bubbles I can drag around, and we hear so much about the relationship between money and politics, and my eyes kind of glaze over. But now that I'm actually dragging these little bubbles across the screen, I can see the relationships on a more, tangible level. So I've enjoyed doing that. I've enjoyed making like little games using some of the coding tools that are available. I did a piece that was about behavioral economics, and I had a little game show type spinner that I used as a visual in the video. And rather than animate that, I was able to actually program it with the help of AI and then kind of make it live spin and be able to do the demonstration live. And it's just a more dynamic demonstration. So a ton of stuff like that's super fun.
That's a really great segue into our next kind of question here for you. And that is, you're talking about all the content you're creating, and it's very intentional, and I appreciate that. So how do you think about your audience as you're creating that content and what they might learn from it?
I mean, every time I meet somebody from my audience, they are extremely curious and often more knowledgeable about a subject than I am. So I think of my job as being the person who is taking the time to nerd out about something for a couple of weeks, but doesn't really have any analytical or expertise advantage over the person in my audience. I just have the time advantage of having spent time on this thing for a while and hyper fixating on it. So I think that's helpful for me. And it's kind of borne out because people are really curious. My job is more just to have spent the time to explore it and then just to use what tools I can to like excite the curiosity. But beyond that, that's kind of all I can really control.
That's really good. And I think there's a certain humility in your approach. And I think that's what makes it very relatable. It's not just, so the content, the relation for me here is I even enjoy your more personal camera angles. Like, I don't know how much you even think about this, but it's like, you have these very produced videos that have a high quality of production that are very more static. Even with motion graphics, they just feel static. And then like your style is more like come along on my journey kind of feel. And it's very real world camera angles. Like we're just right there with you. So I appreciate that. I'm sure it's very intentional.
Yeah. I mean, part of the sausage over the past few years is because of the competition with AI. I've thought that more and more I need to be using hands-on demonstrations, drawing on camera, even though I know how to animate things. And to some degree, it's a little bit disappointing to me because I like learning 3D software to create really cool simulations and stuff like that. But I have to kind of know what is a competitive advantage for me as a person making this stuff. And so far, at least, it's my being a human. So I have to kind of lean into that a little bit.
I like that.
Yeah. I think I still am. Yeah. So that's good.
That was something I pushed as we were developing this is like, when we have we have mistakes, we're not going to stop because it like humanizes it more. And so sorry, audience, if you don't like that stuff, but there's different production values and different kinds of production for different kinds of content. And if we had this too polished, I think it would create a bigger gap between us and our audience. And I like the approaching. I think one of my favorite is when you write on the side of your filing cabinet. That's a great fit.
It's gotten some use.
I love that. But going to your, I was struck by like watching some of your videos. I watch all of them and they come out, and I've noticed that your animation and stuff I feel like has really stepped up recently. Is that AI you're using? What tools? Can you nerd out a little bit and tell us what you've changed recently?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it. It's interesting you say. I've actually tried to tone it back a bit in the past month or so with how much I animate, just because of the reasons that we've said. So recently, I started using ASCII art a little more as a form of diagram, which is like the little text drawings of things and stuff. Even though, just because I think in a world in which you can generate any image, that is scarce. And so, yeah, so I mean that honestly, it's a bit of a drag of the way that things are now, because I enjoy getting into more higher level types of animation. Like it's just fulfilling to me as a person who's spending time creatively doing stuff. And I think that's not really where people are in the audience as much. So I did a video about Buc-ee's, the gas station once. And in that I used a program called Unreal Engine, which is free for pretty much anybody under $1 million a year or some very high threshold. It's free to do. And it was super rewarding for me to model the entire store in Unreal and then have a camera fly through. And that stuff's really fun for me. So I do like to do that,
I'm so glad you mentioned that one, because I literally watched that episode and wondered, I wonder, number one, I was thinking, I wonder if he's doing all the editing and animating here. So you've answered that. And I wonder what he used. So actually, thank you. Literal curiosity.
It's so fun. But the drag is that I made this in Unreal. And for me as a person who gets a satisfaction out of the craftsmanship of making these things, my preferred form of presenting that information would be a super dramatic, slick fly through of the Buc-ee's, beautiful haze in the air. But I had to show the actual program on screen behind me just to prove to people that it wasn't AI and that I actually went through and I physically measured all these features in the Buckies and tried really hard to be rigorous about it. So you have to kind of show your work in a certain way now, in a way that you didn't in the past, which is probably good for the audience, probably good in general, but it is a challenge, as somebody spending hours doing it.
That's an interesting crossover. One of the things we talk about a lot is like not letting the technology get in the way of the instruction and relationships. I think both Arron and I, early in our teaching careers, when technology, got really excited. And I remember my students one time telling me, like, Mrs. Suarez, can we just like stop using this stuff? And like, and it would just take so long to like get started and get rolling. And it would just, it ended up being, this my default was, it ended up being about the technology rather than the instruction. And at that point I was like, no, all right, here's the reframing that you my students have taught me, is that the tools are cool, but they're only cool if they accomplish what you set out to do with them. And if they get in the way, then they're detractive. Well, Phil, I think I appreciate all the time you have spent with us. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you think would be valuable for the teachers to know about your process or how you vision your content in the classroom, or any of that crossover?
Gosh, I mean, I wouldn't presume to know anything at all about that. One of the benefits of having my own kids is that any illusions I had about knowing anything about teaching are gone. I do not know anything at all. I would say, I'm grateful if anybody does use my work and it helps with teaching. I guess I just express my gratitude for that again. But then otherwise, yeah, I wouldn't presume to know anything. Unfortunately, I know how hard it is and how it's crazy how when I'll teach different age levels, how different the attention is and how radically it changes from just kindergarten to first and second grade. The difference is worlds apart. It's so insane. So, yeah, I just think it's fascinating. And I guess the only thing I'd say is like, it's cool that there's opportunities out there and there's lots of new things that one can do if one wants. So yeah, I don't know, not very helpful, but.
Well, that was great. I appreciate the humility, but also the gratitude. And as a teacher, I am grateful for your content and other creators that are doing similar content, because it creates. I know for me, I've seen a very clear thing that when I'm excited about what I am learning and what we're teaching, I find it a little disappointing that it seems like the first time I teach a subject, like if I get a new subject, which doesn't happen that often anymore, but when I start teaching a new thing, the students get more excited and I feel like learn the first time I do it. And they get more out of the class. The first time I taught an advanced computer class, the students actually were so passionate about it that they made a thank you video for me in secret at the end of the class. I've had great classes since then, but they have not done that, which is okay. It was a little weird and overwhelming. I appreciated it, but and it was like the first time I teach a subject, it is more passionate. And so I think that having content like yours and other quality edutainments keeps me as a teacher, as an educator, continuing to be excited about what I'm learning and continuing to be excited about new subjects, and keeps me to, I think, continue to be a better educator. So I want to thank you and others that are making content like yours, and thank you for the authority that you bring with it. And just in closing, I want to say, today we had the privilege of talking with Phil Edwards about his content and his process and how to use that in your classroom. I want to encourage you, be creative with it. If there's, you have a long video, show the parts that are most relevant to your students and your class and what you're teaching. It's very easy to be excited about a video that isn't have anything to do with what you're teaching. And then one thing I often forget to do is save those for the next time I teach it, because I'll show it and then I'll forget to show it again. So do that. Don't be me. Sometimes it's, if it's adjacent, well, share it with your students through your learning management system. That also having supplementary content where the students can extend the learning really goes a long ways, because they're now choosing to do the learning. And I love it when I can create vectors for my students to go be, I'm not requiring them to watch it. It's, if it's adjacent, if it's nearby, it's like we're continuing this conversation outside of the classroom, and they get to be passionate and excited about what we're learning. And it extends that to them, and hopefully creates this, I hope to do, lifelong learners that will continue to find quality content to learn from. If you do use it in your classroom, don't overdo this, because I overdid it last year with some content I was doing. But you can use tools like Magic School, and I think School AI does the same thing. You probably can just toss it into Gemini or ChatGPT to look at the transcript of that video and then create questions. Now, I wouldn't just take those straight up, but having a guide, if it's a video that is content that is valuable enough to take time in the classroom, then having a guide to go with it will help the students engage in the content as well. I did overdo it, so be careful, because the students really told me I did too much of it. And also asynchronous learning. We had a bunch of snow. I don't know, Phil, were your kids at home during all that snow?
Yep.
And it was a pain. And so we took one snow day, and then we did asynchronous learning on those days. And sometimes content like this is really helpful for those asynchronous days, where you can say, watch this video, and you'll get what we need to learn for today. So yeah, that's what we covered today.
And hey, we want to encourage you, if you have questions on EdTech, send them to our help desk at edtechunpack.com. We're here to help. And wherever you're listening, wherever you're on social media, we're probably there too. So connect with us. We'd love to hear more from you. And please, if you enjoy the content, don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube or wherever you're listening.
And yes, we want to always end with a blessing. And today it is, the blessing is that, wow, what an awesome opportunity we have to have access to all this great material, this great content out there. And if you find something gets you excited, then save it. Don't get overwhelmed with it. There's way more content uploaded every second that you could ever show in the lifetime of your classroom. But find the stuff that's meaningful to you. Get excited about it as you do. Being authentic as you're teaching, and being like, hey, this is conveying a message that I think is important, and I want you guys to continue to learn through it, is valuable. Use this as a way to stay relevant, but also you can show old videos as well, as long as they still are connecting, conveying the material. You can reuse it. You don't have to stay on the cutting edge all the time. And remember, there is no substitute for great teaching. It is not just about the tools and technology that you use, but how you foster meaningful relationships with your students to transform their lives. Be blessed.